Hello. I'll be reading to you from The Age of AI and Our Human Future book by Henry A. Kissinger, Eric Schmidt, and Daniel Huttenlocher. I'm here in Greenwich Village, one of my favorite places, really cool neighborhood. And this is Washington Square Park, where it's always quite lively in the summertime. I've been coming here for a few decades, and it's still that lively, bright energy. I'm going to pick up with the chapter called How We Got Here. The conviction that what we see reflects reality and that we can fully comprehend at least aspects of this reality using discipline and reason inspired the Greek philosophers and their heirs to great achievements. Pythagoras and his disciples explored the connection between mathematics and the inner harmonies of nature, elevating this pursuit to an esoteric spiritual doctrine. Thales of Miletus established a method of inquiry comparable to the modern scientific method, ultimately inspiring early modern scientific pioneers. Aristotle's sweeping classification of knowledge, Ptolemy's pioneering geography, and Lucretius's On the Nature of Things spoke to an essential confidence in the human mind's capacity to discover and understand at least substantial aspects of the world. Such works, and the style of logic they employed, became educational vehicles, enabling the learned to develop inventions, augment defenses, and design and construct great cities that in turn became centers of learning, trade, and outward exploration. Still, the classical world perceives seemingly inexplicable phenomena for which no adequate explanations could be found in reason alone. These mysterious experiences were ascribed to an array of gods whom only the devout and initiated could symbolically know, and whose attendant rites and rituals only the devout and initiated could observe. Chronicling the achievements of the classical world and the decline of the Roman Empire through his own Enlightenment lens, the 18th century historian Edward Gibbon described a world in which pagan deities stood as explanations for fundamentally mysterious natural phenomena that were deemed important or threatening. The thin texture of the pagan mythology was interwoven with various but not discordant materials. The deities of 1,000 groves and 1,000 streams possessed in peace their local and respective influence. Nor could the Roman, who deprecated the wrath of the Tiber, deride the Egyptian who presented his offering to the beneficent genius of the Nile. The visible powers of nature, the planets, and the elements were the same throughout the universe. The invisible governors of the moral world were inevitably cast in a similar mold of fiction and allegory. Why the seasons changed, why the earth appeared to die and return to life at regular intervals was not yet scientifically known. Greek and Roman cultures recognized the temporal patterns of days and months, but had not arrived at an explanation deducible by experiment or logic alone. Thus the renowned Eleusinian mysteries were offered as an alternative, enacting the drama of the harvest goddess Demeter and her daughter Persephone, doomed to spend a portion of the year in the cold underworld of Hades. Participants came to know the deeper reality of the seasons, the region's agricultural bounty or scarcity, and its impact on their society through these esoteric rites. Likewise, a trader setting out on a voyage might acquire a basic concept of the tides and maritime geography through the accumulated practical knowledge of his community. Nonetheless, he would still seek to propitiate the deities of the sea as well as of safe outbound and return journeys, whom he believed to control the mediums and phenomena through which he would be passing. The rise of monotheistic religions shifted the balance in the mixture of reason and faith that had long dominated the classical quest to know the world. While classical philosophers had pondered both the nature of divinity and the divinity of nature, they had rarely posited a single underlying figure or motivation that could be definitively named or worshipped. To the early church, however, these discursive explorations of causes and mysteries were so many dead ends, or by the most charitable or pragmatic assessments, uncanny precursors to the revelation of Christian wisdom. The hidden reality that the classical world had labored to perceive was held to be the divine, accessible only partly and indirectly through worship. This process was mediated by a religious establishment that held a near monopoly on scholarly inquiry for centuries, guiding individuals through sacraments toward an understanding of Scripture that was both written and preached in a language few laymen understood. The promised reward for individuals who followed the correct faith and adhered to this path toward wisdom was admission to an afterlife, a plane of existence held to be more real and meaningful than observable reality. In these medieval or Middle Ages, the period from the fall of Rome in the 5th century to the Turkish Ottoman Empire's conquest of Constantinople in the 15th, humanity, at least in the West, sought to know God first and the world second. The world was only to be known through God. Theology filtered and ordered individuals' experiences of the natural phenomena before them. When early modern thinkers and scientists such as Galileo began to explore the world directly, altering their explanations in light of scientific observation, they were chastised and persecuted for daring to omit theology as an intermediary. During the medieval epoch, scholasticism became the primary guide for the enduring quest to comprehend perceived reality. Venerating the relationship between faith, reason, and the church, the latter remaining the arbiter of legitimacy when it came to beliefs, and at least, in theory, the legitimacy of political leaders. While it was widely believed that Christendom should be unified both theologically and politically, reality belied this aspiration from the beginning. There was contention between a variety of sects and political units. Yet, despite this practice, Europe's worldview was not updated for many decades. Tremendous progress was made in depicting the universe. The period produced the tales of Boccaccio and Chaucer, the travels of Marco Polo, and compendia purporting to describe the world's varied places, animals, and elements. Notably, less progress was made in explaining it. Every baffling phenomenon, big or small, was ascribed to the work of the Lord. In the 15th and 16th centuries, the Western world underwent twin revolutions that introduced a new epoch, and with it a new concept of the role of the individual human mind and conscience in navigating reality. The invention of the printing press made it possible to circulate materials and ideas directly to large groups of people in languages they understood, rather than in the Latin of the scholarly classes, nullifying people's historic reliance on the church to interpret concepts and beliefs for them. Aided by the technology, the leaders of the Protestant Reformation declared individuals were capable of, indeed, responsible for, defining the divine for themselves. Dividing the Christian world, the Reformation validated the possibility of individual faith existing independent of church arbitration. From that point forward, received authority in religion, and eventually in other realms, became subject to the probing and testing of autonomous inquiry. During this revolutionary era, innovative technology, novel paradigms, and widespread political and social adaptations reinforced one another. Once a book could easily be printed and distributed by a single machine and operator without the costly and specialized labor of monastic copyists. New ideas could be spread and amplified faster than they could be restricted. Centralized authorities, whether the Catholic Church, the Habsburg-led Holy Roman Empire, the notional successor to Rome's unified rule of the European continent, or national and local governments, were no longer able to stop the proliferation of printing technology or effectively ban disfavored ideas. Because London, Amsterdam, and other leading cities declined to proscribe the spread of printed material, freethinkers who had been harried by their home governments were able to find refuge and access to advanced publishing industries in nearby societies. The vision of doctrinal, philosophical, and political unity gave way to diversity and fragmentation, in many cases attended by the overthrow of established social classes and violent conflict between contending factions. An era defined by extraordinary scientific and intellectual progress was paired with near-constant religious, dynastic, national, and class-driven disputes that led to ongoing disruption and peril in individual lives and livelihoods. As intellectual and political authority fragmented amid doctrinal ferment, artistic and scientific explorations of remarkable richness were produced, partly by reviving classical texts, modes of learning, and augmentation. During this renaissance or rebirth of classical learning, societies produced art, architecture, and philosophy that simultaneously sought to celebrate human achievement and inspire it further. Humanism, the era's guiding principle, esteemed the individual's potential to comprehend and improve his or her surroundings through reason. These virtues, humanism posited, were cultivated through the humanities: art, writing, rhetoric, history, politics, philosophy, particularly via classical examples. Accordingly, Renaissance men who mastered these fields, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, came to be revered. Widely adopted, humanism cultivated a love for reading and learning, the former facilitating the latter. The rediscovery of Greek science and philosophy inspired new inquiries into the underlying mechanisms of the natural world and the means by which they could be measured and cataloged. Analogous changes began to occur in the realm of politics and statecraft. Scholars dared to form systems of thought based on organizational principles beyond the restoration of continental Christian unity under the moral aegis of the Pope. Italian diplomat and philosopher Niccolo Machiavelli himself, a classicist, argued that state interests were distinct from their relationship to Christian morality, endeavoring to outline rational, if not always attractive, principles by which they could be pursued. This exploration of historical knowledge and increasing sense of agency over the mechanisms of society also inspired an era of geographic exploration in which the Western world expanded, encountering new societies, forms of belief, and types of political organization. The most advanced societies and learned minds in Europe were suddenly confronted with a new aspect of reality. Societies with different gods, diverging histories, and in many cases their own independently developed forms of economic achievement and social complexity. For the Western mind, trained in the conviction of its own centrality, these independently organized societies pose profound philosophical challenges. Separate cultures with distinct foundations and no knowledge of Christian scripture had developed parallel existences, with no apparent knowledge of or interest in European civilizations, which the West had assumed was self-evidently the pinnacle of human achievement. In some cases, such as the Spanish conquistadors' encounter with the Aztec Empire in Mexico, indigenous religious ceremonies as well as political and social structures appeared comparable to those in Europe. For the explorers who paused in their conquest long enough to ponder them, this uncanny correspondence produced haunting questions. Were divergent cultures and experiences of reality independently valid? Did Europeans' minds and souls operate on the same principles as those they encountered in the Americas, China, and other distant lands? Were these newly discovered civilizations in effect waiting for the Europeans to vouchsafe new aspects of reality, divine revelation, scientific progress in order to awaken to the true nature of things? Or have they always been participating in the same human experience, responding to their own environment and history and developing their own parallel accommodations with reality, each with relative strengths and achievements? Although most Western explorers and thinkers of the time concluded that these newly encountered societies had no fundamental knowledge worth adopting, the experiences began to broaden the aperture of the Western mind nonetheless. The horizon expanded for civilizations across the globe, forcing a reckoning with the world's physical and experiential breadth and depth. In some Western societies, this process gave rise to concepts of universal humanity and human rights, notions that were eventually pioneered by some of these same societies during later periods of reflection. The West amassed a repository of knowledge and experience from all corners of the world. Advances in technology and methodology, including better optical lenses and more accurate instruments of measurement, chemical manipulation, and the development of research and observation standards that came to be known as the scientific method, permitted scientists to be more accurately observe the planets and stars, the behavior and composition of material substances, and the minutiae of microscopic life. Scientists were able to make iterative progress based on both personal observations and those of their peers. When a theory or prediction could be validated empirically, new facts were revealed that could serve as the jumping-off point for additional questions. In this way, new discoveries, patterns, and connections came to light, many of which could be applied to practical aspects of daily life: keeping time, navigating the ocean, synthesizing useful compounds. The 16th and 17th centuries witnessed such rapid progress with astounding discoveries in mathematics, astronomy, and the natural sciences that it led to a sort of philosophical disorientation. Given that church doctrine still officially defined the limits of permissible intellectual explorations during this period, these advances produced breakthroughs of considerable daring. Copernicus's vision of a heliocentric system, Newton's laws of motion, Van Leeuwenhoek's cataloging of a living microscopic world, these and other developments led to the general sentiment that new layers of reality were being unveiled. The outcome was incongruence. Societies remained united in their monotheism, but were divided by competing interpretations and explorations of reality. They needed a concept, indeed a philosophy, to guide their quest to understand the world and their role in it. Thanks for listening. May you find lasting happiness. Please like and subscribe and catch me in the next video. Bye.